Hello and welcome to Cycling Insights, your cycling podcast that brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Before we start, don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or on your favourite podcast platform. Give us a follow and leave us a review. Let's dive into today's show. Hello and welcome to Cycling Insights, the podcast brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. Matthew Keenan with you and joined in person for the first time in our 11th episode by Simon Gerrans. Simon, welcome, actually welcome in person.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to be here. We're kind of in uncharted territory here, aren't we? We're generally doing this from different corners of the globe, and now we're both back here in Melbourne.
You're normally over in Europe. I'm in Melbourne. Now I'm in Melbourne, and you're in Melbourne as well. How's it feel to be back and having survived 14 days of quarantine?
It feels great. It was well worth it to get through that sort of quarantine period with the family, and now finally be settling back in Victoria as everything's opening up again. It's been so nice to reconnect with family and friends and get out and ride my bike. It's good to be back.
It's the end of a really strange season. So throughout this podcast, we're going to do a bit of a wrap up with our awards. There's no Cycling Australia awards this year, so we won't be able to give out the Oppie, but we will give some awards, international awards for best performers and Australian awards as well. I recently caught up in the high country in Beechworth with Hamish Blake and also Max Gawn, who's the captain of the Melbourne Football Club. We did a charity ride up there. We'll hear from those guys as well. I've caught up just a couple of days ago with Amanda Spratt, who's at the end of her off-season, and then you and I are going to have a quick back and forward on what's our favourite, Mappe or La Claire, but that's to come later on. Let's kick it off with the season review, the awards, and Domestique of the Year. We're going to have an International Domestique of the Year, and we're going to have an Australian Domestique of the Year, and I'm going with the Domestique of the season, Wout van Aert.
Well, Wout van Aert was impressive across the board this year, and I don't think you could say he was just a Domestique of the Year. For me, he was a lot more than that, but I think we'll touch on that a little bit later as well. But yeah, wasn't he impressive? And I think his domestique capabilities really shone through in the Tour de France. Everywhere else, it was his leadership capabilities. But another standout rider was one of his teammates, Sepp Kuss.
It says a lot about Jumbo-Visma. I thought if you just had a mountain domestique, Sepp Kuss would be the winner. And I know what you're saying about Wout van Aert because he's a winner. He's a team leader. But you put yourself in the shoes of a guy who's trying to win the Tour de France and the entire peloton is lined up against a brick wall like schoolyard rules. Who are you going to pick to look after you?
Oh, Wout van Aert every time, particularly with how he was performing at this year's Tour de France. And I don't think it would matter if you're a leader aiming for the general classification or you're a sprinter or a pure climber aiming for the mountains classification. If you were to pick one domestique, it would have been Wout van Aert because he was across the board an absolute standout at the Tour de France.
He was phenomenal, looking after his team leaders on the flats, looking after them in the mountains. And then when he got given some freedom with 2Ks to go, he'd win a sprint finish.
Yeah, and he was doing that on his own as well. He was literally winning these bunch sprints, just basically surfing the lead-out trains of the other teams, placing himself really well, and he has a super fast finish. So, absolute standout rider of the Tour de France, and as you say, probably the Domestique of the Year.
Yeah, he was sensational. So amongst the Australians, there was a fantastic performance on domestique duties at the Giro d'Italia by Rowan Dennis, and I thought that was the defining moment of the Giro. He pretty much was the difference between Sunweb being able to defend or get the pink jersey for Wilco Kelderman and really protect Jai Hindley, and then Tao Gegenhardt being able to take the lead and win the race overall. I thought Rowan Dennis was phenomenal and that performance could be career-changing.
Well, I think it's just opened everybody's eyes up to what Rowan Dennis is capable of. Obviously, his time trial Palmars speak for themselves, but I was a teammate with Rowan for a year, and I could see how committed he was when he was working for a teammate. And he's just stepped up and been able to do that consistently on the biggest stage at the Giro d'Italia and set up the win for Tao Gegenhardt.
He was awesome. Special mention, Jessica Allen for the women's team across at Mitchelton Scott. She is always reliable and she doesn't have to finish a race to have an impact. She's good for the team in the bus as well as she's on the road.
Yeah, great. It's so good to see that is acknowledged as well because the input sort of off the bike and outside of the peloton does have such an impact on the culture of a team environment and how everybody else performs, how everybody else gets through tough periods of the year. So it's really good to see that Jessica Allen has been acknowledged for that side of her career as well.
And I wanted to make a special mention of Miles Scottson, because I thought after his first couple of seasons with BMC, he was maybe a little bit lost and he hadn't found his role in the sport. But he stepped up, particularly at the Giro this year, as a key lead-out man for Arnaud Démare, who won 4 stages. And I think he's found his place in the pro peloton now.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of Anglophones will often turn their nose up a little bit at French teams and say, it's a French team. You know, it's an awkward environment, or the French guys are a little bit special, that sort of thing. But I had a few years racing in French teams throughout my career, and I always really enjoyed the company of the French guys, always got along really well. And it's really great to see that Miles has found a niche, his niche in that team, and has really been able to step up and deliver as a domestique for Arnaud Démare, and contribute to the lead out as well as the team time trials, where I would say that's his real speciality.
Oh, he's awesome. He's such a strong time trialist. So I've gone with Wout van Aert, Rowan Dennis on the Australian side. You share your thoughts with us as well on who you thought was the best as a domestique. For the media performer of the year, amongst the internationals, I couldn't go past Tom Dumoulin because of his bluntness. For you, this is your first time really working on the media side of the fence and commentating on the tour this year. Were there any standouts to you?
Well, actually, I was trying to think of Tom Dumoulin's comments, and one of them was at the start of the Tour de France, and he was basically saying, Jumbo-Visma are going to support the best rider at the tour. Maybe it's Primoz, maybe it's me. And we jumped on that because that was the first moment that we actually heard of any Jumbo-Visma rider sort of saying that's not all about Primoz Roglic. Tom Dumoulin, he calls a spade a spade.
Yeah, and he was a couple of times he was really critical of himself. He said, I was no good today, so I had to work for Primoz. That he beats the media to the punch to criticise him.
Yeah, and I think that's refreshing. It is so refreshing when you're not getting a vanilla answer to a question. You're getting an absolute blunt truth. So yeah, congratulations, Tom.
Yeah, and amongst the Australians, Mitch Docker is always a favourite because of his podcast this year, which has been brilliant, Life Inside the Peloton, and he takes us into the peloton a little bit more than perhaps any other rider does.
And he has got a cult following now, Mitch Docker. There are so many people that I run into anywhere riding my bike, and they all say they love Mitch's podcast. And he was able to sort of, I think, grow that following through the cycling podcast as well this year.
Yeah, I can highly recommend any of Mitch's podcasts. And I also always make a special mention as a media performer for Chloe Hosking, because we spoke about Tom Dumoulin. He calls it straight. Chloe calls it even straighter.
Oh, really? Yeah, I haven't heard of too many of Chloe's comments in the media. Mate, you didn't give me a mention.
For media, you're not part of the peloton anymore.
Yeah, but I'm Australian in the media. My commentary debut at the Tour de France, it obviously wasn't that good.
No. Well, I didn't get a chance actually to hear much of it because I was working at the same time. You enjoyed it though.
I loved working on the Tour de France in commentary. No, it was a great experience, but I don't think I'm in the realm of Mitch Docker all the same.
So next up, we're going for the revelation of the year. And this is a difficult one on both fronts because there were a bunch of revelations that were, some of them you would call them a confirmation, but for other people that don't follow the sport super closely, you'd say they were a revelation. And I've gone with Mark Hirschi. He was the revelation of the tour this year. He was absolutely exceptional. And Michaela Harvey, the young Kiwi, who was a climbing sensation, who was the best young rider at the Giro Rosa this year and finished third on the Queen stage.
Well, Mark Hirschi, he was not only the revelation of the Tour de France, he then backed that up for an outstanding performance at the World Championships, and then he backed that up again. And in my opinion, he should have won Liège-Bastogne-Liège. He was the best guy, and he looked like he had that one until he received a pretty big hook there off Julian Alaphilippe. So Mark Hirschi was definitely the revelation of the year. He was my favourite rider to watch in the tour.
Oh, he was so exciting. And the team, the way Sunweb rode, they were brilliant to watch as a team. Amongst the Australians, the revelation of the year, without question for me, was Grace Brown. I thought she was fantastic. 5th in the time trial at the Worlds. Then she rode strongly again in the road race. She was impressive at Flèche Wallonne, where she was trying to work for Lucy Kennedy. But that second place finish at Liège-Bastogne-Liège is the best second place finish I've seen by an Australian in recent years. And then she backed it up by winning Brahms Appeal a week or so later.
Well, that's going to give Grace huge confidence going forward to know that she has still great legs at the end of the classics and she can ride herself into a second place in a race like Liège Bastogne Liège. To be able to sort of be solo and bridge gaps and still sort of finish on the podium, I think she's obviously a big name to look to for the future.
You had one that you wanted to throw in there as well amongst the Australians as a revelation. Jai Hindley, I mean, second at the Giro, it caught your attention, did it?
Well, Jai Hindley's sort of been on the radar for a number of years. Obviously, he's put in some great performances, but to be so consistent at the Giro d'Italia and really perform strongly in the third week of the race, I think the international peloton really took notice of Jai Hindley at the Giro, and really sort of he cemented his place in the pro peloton in Italy this year.
And he started the season really strongly, the way he won the Jayco Herald Sun Tour, which is a race that you won early in your career. How important is that race or races like that as a stepping stone to give the team confidence in you as a leader and you confidence in yourself?
Like, I think it does wonders for a rider's confidence, especially for a young rider when they put their hand up and go, I want to target this race or I want support at this race, and then they're able to back it up with results because that demonstrates a real leadership qualities to the team. So when that rider will then put their hand up in any race, the team will take notice and they will give them support. So I'm so pleased for Jai that, not only he won the Sun Tour, but he was able to sort of, when he put his hand up in a bigger race and got some support, he then delivered on that front too.
I just want to briefly go back to Rowan Dennis. I just remembered a part of the story around that stage at the Giro where he defined himself as the domestique of the year amongst the Aussies. When he was riding for the Rabobank development team, Wilco Kelderman was part of that team as well. And the team used to always tell Rowan that he has to work for Wilco because he's not as good as Wilco. And then when it came to Kelderman being on the ropes and Rowan Dennis on the front, all the sports director from Ineos had to say was, apparently you're not as good as Wilco.
Rowan doesn't need much to put a bit of fire in the belly, and he loves nothing more than proving somebody wrong. So that would have been absolute perfect. It would have just been, poking an angry bear at that point, I imagine.
It was awesome. Okay, ride of the year, the single performance of the year. For me, it is the easiest decision of all time. Stage 20, Tour de France, Pogačar takes the yellow jersey. That's the best individual time trial performance I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't think that's not only the ride of the year, that's probably the ride of the decade, as at least in what we've seen in cycling. Commentating that performance at the Tour de France left myself and the guy that I was working with at the time, Anthony McCrossing, in a very difficult position because we were simply speechless. We could not believe what we were witnessing in that time trial. So no question about it, ride of the year.
And that takes us back to Tom Dumoulin, who had a media performance without saying anything. When you saw the expression on the face of Tom Dumoulin, Wout van Aert had the mask on for COVID, so he couldn't quite see as clearly. But Tom could not hide his disbelief at the performance of Pogačar.
Yeah, it was gold. And the camera kept going back to them time and time again because it was absolute golden footage. The fact that those guys were there, they'd recently finished their time trial. They were anticipating seeing their teammate come up the mountain and secure the Tour de France and the yellow jersey. And I don't think they could believe what they were seeing.
Oh, it was phenomenal. A couple of special mentions. I thought both Julian Alaphilippe and Anna van der Breggen, their rides to win the World Championships in Italy this year in Imola were outstanding.
Well, a few of my mates put Julian Alaphilippe's name forward as a serious contender for the world titles, and I said, nah, he went too deep in the Tour de France. He looked cooked. The third week of the race, he was trying and he couldn't get any results. So for me, he doesn't have the depth to continue on and perform after going so deep in the Tour. And he proved me wrong. Like in a second, the fact that he was able to attack at the hardest point in the race at the World Championships and hold off a very strong chase group to win the world title was an incredible performance.
And my favourite visual was the side-on shot from the helicopter with Anna van der Breggen riding solo across the ridge on her way to the rainbow jersey. That was absolutely sensational. Another ride that really caught my attention, Julian Alaphilippe unfortunately crashed and could have changed the outcome of this one. But at the Tour of Flanders, when it was the great rivals from cyclocross, Mathieu van der Poel and Wout van Aert going toe-to-toe all the way to the finish. And it was around about 10 PSI, the difference in the end. It was a fantastic race.
Yeah, again, what an awesome season. But I think the classics were incredibly exciting as well. And to see Tour de Flanders battled out between those two guys, and actually to see the respect that they have for one another as well. As soon as they crossed the finish line, it was a pat on the back, and I think they obviously have a massive respect for one another and quite complimentary of each other's ability as well.
The social media posts after it were really good. There's been that thing this year about how it started and how it's going. And there was a picture of how it started, and it was Van der Poel and Van Aert, first and second at Junior Worlds, bottom age Junior Worlds in cyclocross, how it started. And then the photo finish of them at Flanders, how it's going. It was absolutely fantastic. Team of the year, women's team of the year, Boels Dolmans. They completely dominate. They control all the classics. And on the men's side, I went with Jumbo-Visma.
Two Dutch teams.
Two Dutch teams for good reason.
And yeah, rightly so. So I can say from the Jumbo-Visma perspective, and we've talked about the rides of the year, the domestiques of the year, the standout performances of the year, and we're pretty much talking about Jumbo-Visma riders the whole time. I really like the way that this team has built over a number of years. They've done some fantastic recruitment. They've developed riders in-house, and now they're the dominant force in the World Tour.
How do you define their tour performance? Was it a success or was it a failure coming so close and then finishing second?
Well, I think when your goal for the Tour de France is to win overall, anything but that victory is ultimately a failure. But as far as how the team rode, I think they rode brilliantly. I was out riding with George Bennett not so long after the Tour de France, and we were chatting about how the team went. And he said, our goal as a team in the Tour de France was to deliver Primoz Roglic to the final time trial within 1 minute of anybody.
Not leading.
Not even leading. It was a goal to have him within a minute of his nearest rival. So the fact of the matter was they delivered Primoz with a 50-second advantage into that final time trial over Pogacar. And he was just purely beaten by a better rider on the day. He didn't do a bad performance. I think he finished fifth in the time trial, but he was just trumped by a better rider. And like we're talking about, one of the rides of the decade.
Fifth in a time trial at the Tour de France is a good performance.
It's a fantastic performance. Another great performance in that time trial we haven't mentioned, Richie Porte.
Yeah, it was sensational. Yeah, absolutely. So, Rider of the Year, International Rider of the Year, I've gone with Primoz Roglic and Anna van der Breggen. The reason I've gone with Primoz Roglic, sure, he didn't win the Tour, but he finished second, and he was one of the first people to congratulate Pogacar after the time trial. What class. Then he bounces back and he threw everything into the Worlds, but he just didn't have the legs. His win at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, even though Alaphilippe was disqualified, the fact that he beat him to the finish line, it was classic Roglic, never give up until it's finished. And then to maintain that level psychologically and physically to go and win the Vuelta, he was exceptional physically, psychologically. What a role model for resilience.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people were talking about Primoz Roglic's defeat at the Tour de France. Would he ever bounce back from a defeat like that? And Primoz seems to be a very even-keeled rider. When he wins, he doesn't seem to get ridiculously overjoyed. And when he loses, it doesn't seem to affect him too much at all either. So he just seems to be very consistent emotionally, physically, but that level of consistency was at the very top all year.
And Anna van der Breggen, it would have been a really interesting battle between her and Annemiek van Vleuten if Van Vleuten didn't crash at the Giro Rosa. Van Vleuten was dominating early. I think she won 6 of her first 5 races back after the lockdown, and big races like Strade Bianche, etc. But then she crashed at the Giro Rosa. Van der Breggen won that. She won the World's Time Trial. She won the road race. She then won Flèche Wallonne for the 6th year running. She gets the nod for me just ahead of Annemiek van Vleuten.
Yeah, again, it's just such a consistent season. And, like you said, it speaks for itself. To win Flèche Wallonne 6 years in a row, it's a very simple race. It's all about the legs on the Mur de Huy. But to do that consistently for 6 years in on the trot, when everybody knows it's the same tactic and it just comes down to legs, is an outstanding track record.
Okay, Australian Cyclist of the Year on the road. I've gone with Grace Brown for the women. A disappointing season for Amanda Spratt, our very own Amanda Spratt, mainly because of the crash that she had at the Giro Rosa and the concussion, etc. But Grace Brown, for me, wins it hands down on the women's side of the fence. For the men, what was the performance? 3rd at the Tour de France by Richie Porte and no stage win, or second at the Giro d'Italia with a stage win for Jai Hindley?
I'm going to go with Richie. Richie has been around the mark for so long in the Tour de France. I think you and I both wrote him off as a podium finish with probably a week to go in the race. We didn't think he was going to get there. But
speak for yourself. I've been on him all the way through.
Oh, come on. I think we need to wind back a couple of podcasts and listen to that. But no, just to see his maturity in this year's Tour de France. He had the support of the team behind him who managed him really well. They didn't load him with pressure. They actually even gave him an option to go home from the Tour de France because his daughter was born during the tour. But he stuck around. He stayed consistent. He had his fair share of bad luck. He had some untimely punches. Just kept an even keel and was able to ride back to the favourites, and then put in a great final time trial to place himself on the podium. So I was so pleased for Richie to get that result.
Yeah, I think third at the Tour is a bigger result than second at the Giro. And going into the Tour, I had Richie in fifth place overall. And the Tour is the one that everybody peaks for. Whereas, there's not everybody's at their best at the Giro. Not everybody's necessarily at their best at the Vuelta. And for him to finish third at this point in his career and punching out the numbers that he was a few years ago at 34, 35 years of age, exceptional. And it's a testament to his strength of character. So Richie Porte is my Australian male road cyclist of the year. Grace Brown, the female Australian road cyclist of the year. We've got to touch on a few disappointments. One of them nobody could control, and that was COVID. But on the back of that, didn't we have some entertainment when things started happening again?
Well, we're really fortunate that majority of the World Tour races actually happened, but it was in a very compact calendar. And I think you would say it was probably the most exciting compact calendar that we've ever seen. Rather than having these races spread out over the year and different riders coming in and out of form, everybody seemed to be on form at once. And we had different riders lining up for a whole array of races, and it made for some exciting racing.
Two teams that we expect big performances from, Movistar and Mitchelton Scott. Let's start with Movistar. They're in a rebuild phase. They were nowhere really to be seen at the Tour, although the team's classification keeps popping up. I thought Enric Mas was pretty good for them, though, at the Vuelta, and saved their season in terms of hope for 2021.
Yeah, and they've just signed Superman Lopez.
Yes.
I've seen as well. So they're adding to their firepower again in the mountains. But again, Lopez, he's going to be there. He's going to be in that top 10 position. I don't see him as a big winner in Grand Tours. So they are really lining their roster with good options, but I don't see anyone as an out-and-out favourite in that team to win a Grand Tour.
Particularly if there's a time trial for Lopez.
Particularly if it's a time trial, unless it's a very steep uphill one.
So Mitchelton Scott, since their inception as the Green Edge team and then Orica Green Edge, they've won a stage every season at least one Grand Tour. This year, for the first time, they didn't win a stage in a Grand Tour. Plus, we had the Manuela Foundation fiasco throughout the season. This, I think, has been the most challenging year for Mitchelton Scott.
Well, the team, I think, from the outside looking in, it just looked very unsettled this year. There was obviously a lot going on with a change in the upper management. Like you mentioned, the Manuela Foundation fiasco. They've been searching for a sponsor for so many years. It looked like they had one with Manuela Foundation, and then that didn't eventuate. Fortunately, Jerry Ryan has stepped in again to support the organisation. So hopefully they'll settle again and have a great 2021 season. But yeah, the results speak for themselves. They had a pretty mediocre year.
I still don't know what the team's going to be called next year.
I think it's going to be probably a combination of Mitchelton, Jayco, Let's Go Motorhome.
And what's another Jerry Ryan business?
Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that whole organisation and any Australian cycling fan should be really thankful for Jerry Ryan's contribution once again.
And my main low for the year was the crash at the Tour of Poland with Fabio Jakobsen and Dylan Groenewegen. And I feel for both of them in this situation. Dylan did do the wrong thing, but lots of sprinters have done exactly the same and the consequences weren't as bad. But he looks like he's really carrying the emotional scars, and Jakobsen is carrying the physical scars, and there must be emotional scars having such a nasty crash.
Yeah, for sure. The big crashes like that, you don't bounce back from overnight. And he obviously had some terrible injuries. I think he was in a coma for a number of days, so he wasn't in a good way. So what's disappointing is these two riders are copying the brunt of the bad press and the ill feeling from this crash. You don't hear much of the organisation. You don't hear much from the UCI. there's plenty other stakeholders here that should be stepping up and taking some responsibility.
Those barricades weren't up to standard, and the UCI should be holding the race organizer accountable, and they should be accountable as well.
Yeah, as far as I can see, the race organisation should be held very accountable because, okay, it was wrong what Groningen did there, but if the barriers had have been safer, I don't think the consequences of the crash would have been near severe.
Totally agree. So share your thoughts with us on social media, who your favourite riders were of the year, any of your low moments as well. Amanda Spratt is somebody who's had a few low moments this year, particularly because of her crash at the Giro Rosa, which resulted in some serious concussion. She's staying over in Europe by the looks of it throughout the off-season, and I caught up with her just a couple of days ago. Well, Amanda Spratt, this is now your off-season. Normally you spend your off-season travelling back to Australia and spending time with family, but this year, 2020, consistent with the rest of the year, that's not happening.
No, feels like the year just keeps on giving, doesn't it? But yeah, it's been a very different off-season. Normally I'd be on holiday somewhere firstly, which just didn't happen with all the travel restrictions here in Europe. And then, yeah, we normally also have our sort of big team camp where we prepare for next season. So it's an opportunity to meet your new teammates, get your new bike or get set up on the bike and have meetings and that sort of thing. So that also didn't really happen this year. Like I went to the Italian team base for a couple of days and sort of rushed through a few things there and got set up. But yeah, it's certainly been very, very different to what we're used to.
And you do have a few new teammates for next season as well. So it'll be really intriguing when you do get a chance to meet them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was fortunate when I was at the Italian side of the team camp, as you would say. We had 3 of my new teammates there, so I did meet them. Anna, our Spanish rider, was at the Girona base camp. But yeah, there still hasn't really been that opportunity to sort of sit down and meet each other and, you know, start teaching them the Aussie slang and getting them really into the culture of our team. So yeah, I think we're scheduled to have a sort of online meeting next week, which will be the first chance to get the whole team virtually together. But there's a whole lot of virtual meetings happening at the moment. Bit bizarre.
As you know, no matter what the language is, everybody works out the slang really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone works it out, or they find a way, or you see them just staring blankly at you at the dinner table, and then you take a few moments to explain. But it's always a fun part of the job, is that side of things.
So the decision not to come home for the off-season and spend Christmas with your family, how hard was it to come to that decision, and why did you come to that decision?
Yeah, it's been quite a hard decision, and I have to say I still feel guilty about it, or just wondering whether I made the right decision or not. But yeah, I mean, that's probably the hardest part about my decision not to come back, is that I won't see my family, I know, for quite some time. But I have to say they've been really supportive as well. But yeah, my partner's here in Europe, so I know I'm fortunate that I have loved ones both in Europe and in Australia. So I'm going to make the most of that. And then also from a competitive side of things, I just wanted to make the decision to really give myself the best preparation into next season. And obviously we heard Cadell's and Tour Down Under is not happening at that World Tour level. And then almost with the Nationals moving into its February slot, it just made it for me. It didn't really make sense for my preparation. My first race in Europe is February 18th in Valencia, and before that I wanted to do an altitude block to prepare for my European season, and where my really, really big goal next year is the Olympics, and before that the Classics. So I mean, yeah, it was a tough decision in terms of that as well. I mean, I'm such a proud Australian, and I know how it's been to wear the national champions jersey, so I know I'm not going to get the chance to defend that, which is also really sad. But I'm just trying to think sort of bigger picture, and I know when I've made hard decisions like that in the past, like forgoing my chance to race in the Commonwealth Games in 2018 to do the Classics instead, I know that really paid off. So I think, like for me it was a hard decision, but if anything, this year has also taught me that it's okay to sometimes have a different preparation, or things don't quite play out how you may want them in your head all the time, but it doesn't mean that it can't be successful. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Buninyong won't be the same without you, so perhaps you and I can cut a deal. I'll pay for you to have a VPN so you can actually watch the SBS stream over there, and you send me text messages with what's going to happen next so I can sound really smart.
I would love that. I would love to be able to sit there and listen to you and Robbie and Bridie. I'm not sure who's commentating, but yeah, that would be brilliant.
It'll be a strange experience for you if you are able to watch the Australian Championships from Switzerland or Italy, wherever it is that you'll be based at that time, maybe at the altitude camp in Spain, and see your national championships from the other side of the world.
I know it's going to be a hard one. I'm going to be screaming at the TV. I'm sure I'll be screaming at the TV and wishing I was there. But oh yeah, I mean, I'm also really excited for some of my really strong teammates. Someone like Grace Brown, Lucy Kennedy. It'd be really, really exciting to see them get up there and hopefully win the title.
So for you, based on what you've just told us about starting your racing season on February the 18th, and you've spoken about the off season, it sounds like the off season is off and now it's pre-season.
Yep. So we've just moved into pre-season. So that means that I'm back in the gym at the moment, which is I actually haven't done gym in a few years, but we decided to reintroduce it. I didn't.
Why?
I wasn't very excited with the new. Well, I'm doing my first European winter, and yeah, I had a long discussion with my coach Gene Bates, and he thought it could be a really great idea to get back into the gym just for this first sort of strength block, sort of first 4 to 6 weeks back in the gym and get that first lot in. And yeah, I have to say I'm really, really enjoying it, apart from I'm permanently walking around like a penguin because I can't move any, you can't really move any muscles. So I'll give that nice visual to everyone. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it actually. It's sort of a different stimulus for the body. And I think it's the right time to get back in the gym and build up that strength in that way. Sort of last time I did gym, I'd sort of just grown, I felt like it wasn't giving me a lot anymore, and I also wasn't enjoying it. When I had my big injury sort of 10 years ago, I was in the gym 6 days a week, so it sort of became more like a chore for me, whereas now I'm getting back in the gym and I've had a bit of a break, and it's something that's really exciting actually and really enjoyable and just a bit different, and I already am seeing the benefits, so I think it's going to be a good platform into then hitting some big kilometers and more strength on the bike in January.
So it sounds like it's good for your headspace as well, because although you said it felt like a chore 10 years ago, now it's fresh.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a stimulus, and I think maybe you can even relate. Like I've seen you doing so many ergo sessions and sort of different training as well. And I guess for you as well, it's a new or different stimulus. So for me, it's the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
Like with the gym, it's just something different, and you're like, oh wow, and you still feel the burn, and it's a shorter session, and it's a different feeling of being dead afterwards. But it's yeah, you can feel that your body's really doing something.
Well, one of the things that I've really enjoyed in terms of, the riding that I'm doing, which is obviously at a completely different level, is that I've had consistency, but I've had variety. So
Yeah.
there's been a consistent pattern in a few things that I've done, but there's been variety which keeps you psychologically fresh and looking forward to the sessions, which I've found for what I'm doing, which is effectively just preparing for an event like Le Tap Australia, is really good for both your head and it's good for you physically.
Definitely. And I think sometimes that's where you get the most out of your body as well. Like I know, yes, I'm doing the gym now in my preseason. In the first lockdown, I purchased a Scott gravel bike. So I've set up my gravel bike again. I've got some wider sort of tires and, I have trails all around me. I can go out and ride 3 or 4 hours on flat or hilly trails and not see a car. So I'm doing a bit of that. I'm doing a bit on the road. So I'm sort of just mixing it up, but it's all work. It's all hard work. And I know it's all sort of moving me towards my goals. So it's just, yeah, it's been really good psychologically too.
Yeah. What about your psychological preparation for potentially your first ever white Christmas?
Yeah, I think I mentioned last time, but I have been Googling how to survive a
You
winter and
did?
Christmas. So
Any success?
so I'm looking at purchasing some better gloves, I think, and I've been looking in, the sports shops about those feet warmers, the ones you can
Yeah.
just put in the microwave and heat up. But yeah, if anyone's listening and have got some tips for me, send them my way. So I haven't got much further other than just wearing more jackets.
Well, there's the famous image from the backstage pass that Dan Jones did with Matt White one time. I can't remember what the race was, but the weather was miserable, and he had the window on the team car down just a slither. It was about down by about an inch. The heater was on full bore, and he just screamed out the window, "There's no bad weather, just bad clothing."
Oh gosh, it's a famous word of the coach, isn't it? I'd
Yeah,
like to get them out
exactly.
there in that sort of weather and do that, but oh gosh, yeah. The
Yeah.
other thing I've done is I've started making my little heat chamber in my bathroom. So I mean, summer can't come to me, so I can't go to summer, but I'm going to bring summer to me. I did
Yeah,
a
so that's part of your preparation for Japan, for Tokyo 2020.
Yeah, exactly. So we're introducing some heat training. I think most of the athletes will end up doing this as well. So it's just more keeping the heat exposure during what is going to be winter. So I was in there in 34 degrees a couple of days ago. So Bringing the summer to me.
Training in a sauna. Spratty, we're going to miss you at the National Championships, but if we can get you perhaps online, we might see if we can come to you at the National Championships and get your insights. All the best for your first white Christmas over in Europe, and I'm sure your mum, Lynn, will be all over the internet, whatever it is that she talks to you on, whether it's FaceTime or whatever it is. You'll get plenty of Lynn Spratt throughout Christmas.
I'm sure I will, and I look forward to it. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Spratty. So, Simon, it's a new experience this for Amanda Spratt. She's now starting the pre-season. Whilst there's a lot of other riders, at this point, last year they were starting the pre-season, but some of them this year now are just starting their off-season because the year finished so late. The Vuelta normally finishes in the middle of September. This time it finished in the middle of November. How will that impact on the start of season 2021?
Well, I think who knows when the 2021 season is actually going to start, though. So it'd be very difficult for these riders knowing when they're going to have their first peak of the year, because you would have to say that early season races all look very much in question at this point in time. So I think they will probably just delay everything ever so slightly. They might miss what would they normally have their first peak of form in January. Maybe they'll push that back to March. So I think they'll do a similar build-up, similar sort of base and similar sort of preparation for the season, but it'll all be a little bit delayed.
Well, I had my big performance last weekend. I went and did the hunger ride for Food Bank Victoria. It was 165 kilometres. Roads that you know well. We started in Beechworth, down into Myrtleford, up Mount Buffalo, back down to Myrtleford, and the back way into Beechworth, up the Stanley Climb. It was brutal. Longest ride I have done in a decade.
How many PBs there?
A few. And you know what I had? I had a heart rate PB because we rode up Mount Buffalo like it was a handicap race, and I brashly started off scratch, along with Baden Cook, green jersey winner at the Tour de France, a couple of guys in their late 20s who ride A-grade club races. Richard was one of them. The other guy, Trevor, was the other guy. And then we had Brenton Jones with us, who 2 years ago won the Australian Criterium title, full-time cyclist. And I sat in Brenton's pocket the whole way and told him if I needed him to back it off 10 watts or pick it up 10 watts. And for that climb, we did the climb in 57 minutes and 26 seconds. My average heart rate was 177 beats per minute. Before that day, I thought my threshold was 170.
That's not bad for an old boy.
Oh, he's
177 beats a minute
for an hour.
That's very impressive.
I had 20 minutes at 180 beats per minute.
However, Brenton didn't get the Domestique of the Year, even for that performance.
Yeah, I know. We should have got a couple of votes for that one. But we had a couple of guests on there with us. Hamish Blake, who I'm sure you know is the host of Lego Masters and all these other fantastic adventures. And we had Max Gorn with us as well, who is 208 centimetres and he weighs about 110 kilos. He's the biggest bloke I've ever seen on a bike.
I imagine, what sort of size bike does he ride at that? It'd have to be custom made.
I think it's like a 64 centimetre frame. Like, you can't go and buy it at the shop. Yeah, he's absolutely enormous. And they had Matt Tilley help organise it for Food Bank Victoria. He's a former radio host on Nova as well. And I caught up with them after the ride. Here's Hamish Blake, Max Gorn, and a couple of snippets as well from Matt Tilley. Rightio, Hamish. How did you get roped in to riding 174 kilometres?
Yeah, great question. Well, as an ambassador for Food Bank, I was happy to put my face out there. I was happy to put my voice out there. I didn't realise it would include legs and lungs as well. So I guess the whole body's been roped in. But gee, I'm glad I was, because what a fun day.
It was a pretty good day. Importantly, the fundraising though, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You raised 30-something thousand, but significantly, you made a $10,000 donation.
Yep.
How much did your wife make?
Oh, look, I'm doing a bit of a Trump recount here. Initially, it looks like she donated $10,001, which would make her the greatest contributor to the cause. But I'm still counting the money she donated in Georgia, Pennsylvania. It's not certified at the moment, so at the moment, no comment.
How did you get into cycling to start with?
It was also through a charity. I do some work with a charity called Soldier On, which is it looks after returning military veterans and service personnel. And there was a ride in Italy one year in the Dolomites, and I love Italy and I love mountains. And they said, hey, would you be interested in riding with the team? And I said, look, sounds great. And they said, oh, terrific. We didn't know you were a cyclist. And I went, oh, I'm not a cyclist. And they said, oh, do you have a bike? I said, no, but I can get one. I just assumed it wouldn't be that hard. And then next thing you know, we're in the Dolomites, and I found out, yeah, It's hard. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, that's when I really got into it. I trained for that trip, and then we rode through the Dolomites, and pretty good introduction.
Did you have Cadell Evans on that ride?
Cadell was on the ride too. So I sort of feel like I got into, it's like jamming with the Beatles and then getting into music afterwards and going, looking back and going, those guys were pretty good. Yeah, so like riding up, Paso Jow and stuff with Cadell. Pretty special memory for your first experience of bike riding.
Yeah, first ride, Dolomites, with Australia's greatest ever cyclist.
Yeah,
welcome to bikes.
And it was great fun too because, Cadell's obviously riding like in the BMC top and just over in Italy and stuff, he's like, anywhere in Europe, it's anywhere that Cadell's on the road, that experience of seeing people double take when they saw him, because of course a lot of people wear BMC jerseys, but not everyone has the world championship stripes. And so it's like seeing someone playing basketball in like a LeBron jersey and they're going, oh, gee, that's LeBron. That is LeBron.
You're like this. My favourite Cadell moment was after he'd won the tour. We were riding back from a corporate event in Brisbane. A couple of tradies came past us and they abused us. We get to the next traffic lights. They realised it was Cadell and they asked for an autograph. He said no.
Yeah, geez, there's a lot. There's a lot about Australia. There's a lot about Australia. There's a lot about Cadell. There's a lot about cycling culture. That's a great story.
Yeah. What's next for you on bikes?
Great question. I mean, I didn't think I'd be sitting here. Exactly.
E-bike.
Just a city bike, I think, for a little while. No, that was a great... I don't ride I don't do a lot of bunch rides, and I really learnt today that you can tuck in and get a few kilometres for free. Yeah. So who knows what the next challenge will be, but I'll look forward to finding one.
Good. One of the big battles was actually trying to get your wheel, Max Gawn, as the biggest bloke out there. And Matt Tilley sat behind you the whole time on the flat.
I actually didn't see his face for the whole race.
Wasn't aware he was here.
He literally sat on me the whole... Actually, no, he didn't because I got rid of him on the climb, on the Stanley's climb.
You need to get one of those big rear-view mirrors that you see the guys riding cross-country using.
We've got to find out what Italian for remora fish is, and that'll be my title. Forget the shark of Messina. I'm the remora fish of Stanley's. Suck onto the big shark.
So how does a guy at 208 centimetres get into riding a bike?
More the sport. Love of the sport first. Then the activity really came second. And then people always go, oh, Maxie loves cycling, let's bring him along. But I'm not actually quite good at it. But
it makes us feel terrific because we can finish ahead of a pro athlete. like little, of course, you've got the biggest genetic handicap of all time.
You also look like you should be on a penny farthing, I reckon. With the height and the beard, it'd be just perfect Maxie out the front.
That'd be a harder way up, wouldn't it? Oh.
So how much do you get to ride with, mixing in with football? And do they let you ride much?
You had to be careful. I got a strong correlation with Dilmahami and riding. So this next week is interesting. I'll have to go for a couple of light races.
We did do Max and I did 3 peaks together. I'm a Melbourne supporter too, so the last thing I want to do is take Maxie out and stress that beautiful body. But after 3 peaks, that's when you did your hammy. The next season.
Yeah.
Uncorrelated. I'm calling it.
So I'll have to go for a light jog tomorrow, I reckon. Wake up tomorrow morning. Go for a little jog.
I've got a Pilates reformer in my room if you want.
So, Matt Tilley, for you having pulled this event together, helped pull this event together, how important is it to have guys like this participate in the ride?
It's a distraction, no doubt. I think it's helpful because, what it does is it gives a lot of guys something to beat, something to tell their wives about, which is most blokes who ride don't tell their wives anything about riding, so it's an entirely new phenomenon for them. But, also the fundraising efforts of these guys is probably the big thing we need to talk about. We've raised over 120 grand here. A quarter of that, I think, was Hamish.
Still got a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Hey, awesome. Thanks. Big fan of the show.
What I loved about that event is what tells us the story of cycling. And I can remember an event that you and I did in Canberra with the then Prime Minister, Tony Abbott. Now, whether you agree with his politics or not, you respect the office of Prime Minister. So we got to have a chat with Tony Abbott about riding a bike. And he said that the thing that he liked about cycling was all day long he was, yes, Prime Minister, no Prime Minister. But when he was on the bike, he was Tony. And then when I did this ride with, Hamish Blake has got 1.1 million followers on Instagram. Max Gawn is the captain of one of the big AFL clubs here in Melbourne. On the bike, they're Max and Hamish, and they're equals to everybody else.
That's one of the beauties of cycling. And I actually got asked the same question last week. What do you love about cycling? And it's the great equalizer. You could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or you could be an apprentice plumber. Once you're out there on the bike, your stature outside of that means nothing, and you're only ever as good as your last performance. So you could be a world tour rider, but if you're at the end of your off season, you're just getting started back again, a local club rider is going to give you a hard time. So it's very true, it's very honest, and it's very equal. So that's the beauty of cycling.
One of the great things about the event on that topic was we were sort of kind of in teams, and I was in the Jones engineering team, and we had this guy, Trevor, on our team who turns 70 in April. And he, in the handicap race at Mount Buffalo, he started with Max Gawn, and Max went off at 100 miles an hour the first few Ks. Trevor had experience and just rode within himself. And Max said that at about the halfway mark, Trevor comes past him, "Keep it going, Maxie." And then Max's post on social media was, "I did this ride and got beaten by a 70-year-old.
Fantastic. I wouldn't like to see Trevor line up against Max on the football field, though.
I think Max might split Trevor in half. So on that topic, we're coming into some warmer weather. I want to get a few tips from you in terms of, dividing where you spend your time when you're training. What I found really difficult on the hunger ride that I did was towards the back end of it, it was 37 degrees, and I struggled with the heat.
I guess also being in lockdown, and I guess so many riders, they've only sort of done some intense training, but haven't really done long sessions. So to have a number of short sessions on your belt, to then front up and do 170 kilometers, like you said, it's very different. And I guess that's where that real endurance, lack of endurance would kick in.
Yeah, I've been averaging for the last 5 months, 5.5 hours per week on the bike, most of it in the garage on Zwift. The ride time on Saturday in the hunger ride was 5.5 hours. So I did 1 week in 1 day.
Oh, there you go. So you have the rest of the week off?
Yeah, that's done. And my TSS, my training stress score, was 265 or something or other. I've been averaging about 300 for the week.
There you go. But I guess, like you said, as the warm weather kicks in now, we do have the luxury to be able to get out on the road, longer days, so you can actually get out before work. You can back it up with another ride after work if you have to. And then again, on the weekends, it's fantastic weather. So good opportunity to put a few more kilometres in the legs.
And you can get social now with many of the restrictions around the country easing on COVID. So I'm stopping for coffee, guaranteed. Rapid fire questions on the topic of training. Early morning or pro hours? And what are pro hours? When are they?
That's a great question because, when I was racing professionally, I'd always like to get my training done early, first thing in the morning.
What's early when you're a pro bike rider?
I would try and get out. Well, it depends how hot it was. If it was going to be really hot, I would even get out, 6 a.m. And get as much as I could done before it got really hot. But particularly when I was in Australia, and I guess this is pro hours sort of concept come in. I was always pretty busy each afternoon. Yeah. So again, I try and get my training done as much as I could in the mornings. Even when I was in Europe, though, in the afternoons, I'd have things planned, whether it be a gym session or some massage or physio treatments, things like that. So to get everything into the day, I would try and get out early morning.
I love early mornings. If I'm not out before, the start of school time, so to speak, I'm not getting out. I'm not going out for a bike ride at 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
I hate it when the weather's really bad in the mornings. So you go, especially these days, I'm not even going to bother take. And then it comes out a beautiful afternoon because I don't like riding in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But if I've missed my morning window, then it's likely not going to happen.
All right. Big mountain passes, Alpe d'Huez or the Stelvio?
Oh, the Stelvio.
No.
Every time the Stelvio.
Why?
Stelvio is spectacular. Alpe d'Huez, to ride as a pass, to get down the other side of Alpe d'Huez is this narrow, rough, sort of patchy road. Whereas the Stelvio, it is just spectacular on both sides.
Yeah, but you've got the names of all the winners on the corners on Alpe d'Huez.
Yeah, but even as a climb, though, it's not even that much of a spectacular climb, Alpe d'Huez. Obviously, it's cool to ride past through all the switchbacks and see the names of the champions that have won up there in the past. But I prefer to look around and see the landscape of Italy around the Stelvio.
All right, it's on the record. It's been saved. Simon Gerrans says Alpe d'Huez is nothing much at all. Lavi Claire or Mappe cycling kit?
Mappe.
Oh, you can have that as well. Lavi Claire is iconic. It was the one that started that kind of trend.
Yeah, but I spent a portion of my early career racing in Mappe shorts because they were a sponsor of the Australian under-23 national team.
Of course.
So I have this little, this little sort of soft spot for that Mapei kit.
Okay, I'll give you that, but I'm going with Lavi Claire because when I was falling in love with the sport, it was the back end of Le Monde. It was Le Monde returning from the hunting accident, but there's still those great images of Le Monde in Lavi Claire kit. Andy Hampston rode for them, Steve Bauer. They had Anglo guys on the team, and there was some other guy called Bernard Hinault. Next up, Alberto Contador or Andy Schleck. And let's take Alberto's doping out of it in terms of the Beefgate from 2010. Just a rider to watch for pure entertainment's sake. Contador or Schleck?
Contador.
Hands down.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. Alberto Contador was an absolute champion of the sport, and he was a racer. He would have ambitions to win every single day, and he expected his teammates to be the same. He was a super hard worker. He was a winner, and he has an incredible Palmares.
Yeah, the day that defined, or the event that really defined that element of Alberto for me was his last Volta a España, and he was riding with Kunde-Kort. And after a couple of days, he was already about 5 minutes behind. And we bumped into Kun at the hotel. And we said, oh, what's the plan now? Is Alberto going to target stage wins? No, he still thinks he can win. And he's hatching plans on how he can win. He didn't win, but the last ever mountain stage that he rode was at the Angliru. And he won that stage. The next day he rode into Madrid and he retired.
Yeah, fantastic. Andy Schleck. Andy Schleck had some fantastic results as a pro. It felt like he had a very short career.
He did. He's younger than Richie Porte and Chris Froome.
Yeah, but it was a spectacular one. Andy Schleck and I turned professional on the same year. He turned professional with CSC. I turned professional with AG2R. So our careers kind of run in parallel. However, I think it was in his first appearance at the Giro d'Italia. He may have even he was on the podium. So he was right up there really quickly. But he burnt out very quickly as well.
Yeah, and he's a tour winner. It's a hell of a career. Final one, schooner or pint? I'm going to answer this one quite easily. Pinot Noir.
Well, now I'm back in Victoria. I'm going to go with a pot.
Very good. Awesome. All right, Garro. Well, you're back in Melbourne now. We might have to get out for a couple of rides at some stage, but make sure you take it easy on me. But be warned, my threshold has improved.
I don't think there's any fear of me dropping you, Matt. I'll meet you back at the cafe.
Very good. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to tell your friends, subscribe on whatever your favourite podcast tune is, and we'll catch up with you next time. Thanks for listening to Cycling Insights, brought to you by L'Etape Australia by Tour de France. To learn more about the event or to register, visit letapeaustralia.com. It's LETAPE Australia.com. letapeaustralia.com. We'll see you on the road.